How are you?
Okay, now we can really start. I'm great now that we got this thing going on.
Awesome.
Okay, so can you tell us a little bit about yourself
Sure.
and what you do?
Yeah. So I started a company called Cybersecurity for Humans, and I called it for humans because this is really focused on those of us who are not into IT or into technology. I'm not saying that we don't like to play online, but we don't want to spend all our time figuring out the back end of stuff. And my goal is to really help people, entrepreneurs, but also just families and whomever who don't want to learn about cybersecurity but do want to stay safe online. So, I offer courses and consulting and auditing, and I'm also starting a membership program this month as well. So,
Mhm. Okay, so what exactly is meant under cybersecurity?
good question. Good question. Cybersecurity is really about keeping your digital assets safe. That's it. It's really simple, right? The
Mhm.
problem is that people don't realize what digital assets include. And it
Mhm.
would be everything from anything that you do with your business, but also information that you have. So my phone, for example, I have a whole bunch of names of addresses of colleagues, of friends, of family members. Those are my digital assets. My pictures on my phone of my family, digital assets. My business stuff, my videos, my website, all digital assets. And they all require that we have really good habits so that information isn't stolen.
Mm. What kind of habits would that be?
So, um, and this is where it's really hard because people don't like change, and it's actually the only way that you can really be successful in this. But it's little things like um, making sure that all of your passwords are unique and weird and complicated. I always say if you know your passwords, you're not doing it right. Unless you have a photographic memory, the chances are you shouldn't know your passwords. They should be complex. It is making sure that you're going to safe websites. Like sometimes I'll buy stuff and I want to buy it from someone, but I don't know the owner of the website and it's a relatively new website. So I will buy the product off of Amazon or another website that I know is legitimate because I don't know if that website is legitimate. It could be learning to identify phishing attempts and catfishing
Mhm.
attempts. So since I've been doing Facebook, this is a true story. So I did a Facebook Live a couple months ago on how people scam on Facebook and how to tell a catfisher. And the first
Mhm.
comment was some guy going, "Oh, you have such beautiful hair. Is that your natural color? Can you give me your phone number so we can connect?" And I'm like, really? You clearly haven't even paid attention to what I was doing. So, but it's just a matter of just like it's when we're little, we learn to cross the street. We learn to look both ways before we cross the street, right? That is something
Mhm.
that every mom in this group has to teach their children. It is not intuitive to them. Um, when my youngest was about 2 or 3, he refused. So we sat out in front of my mother's house in front of her little walkway, and we practiced for, I kid you not, like an hour and 15 minutes until it became a habit for him. And, I'm happy to say that at 15, he hasn't been hit by a car. So that's been, that was a good time. And so when we are going to online, we need to learn to look both ways. We should
Mhm.
assume, right? It's really easy when we go online to assume that everyone is friendly and everyone has good intentions, and especially since a lot of times the anonymity of the internet allows us to get really intimate really fast, right? We find
Mhm.
somebody who had an experience that's really common to us, and or that we both have had, and we get really intimate. We start sharing really personal details, and it's really powerful, right? Like I didn't find that with my neighbor, but I found this with my neighbor online. The problem is you don't really know what is happening on the other side of the internet, right? You don't
Mhm.
know what's happening on the other side of your computer. So I'm not suggesting, sorry, it's my computer just, I'm not suggesting that we never share anything, right? We just have to be judicious in how we share it. So I used to, one of the things I used to like to do was to troll trolls, is what I would say. Like, people were just being mean, and I would never be mean back to them, but I'd sort of call them out on their behavior, and it became kind of a funny thing. But when they started tracking down, oh, so you lived here and you did this and you did that, I went, I'm going to stand back. I'm going to hide all that information, and I'm not going to do that anymore, because, you know, safety first, always has to be first.
Yeah, this was one of my what's the word, things holding me back, you know, when I went online, actually having to share my address, my personal address where I live, because in email marketing it's required and so on. So I know I have to set like a fake address or some.
Can you
not
do
really
something
fake,
like
but
like in the US here we have post office boxes where you can,
yeah,
so you need to
I
do a
should
PO
do that,
box.
because this is we don't know what kind of weirdos are online, even though like you said, that we get friendly very easily. I'd say that for my nation it's kind of the other way around. At least, I don't know, I feel like I was brought up in this spirit, like, beware on the internet, beware, because there are so many scammers and so on. So it was really even weird for me to buy the first online coaching program, because I was like, oh my God, am I getting scammed? This is a lot of money. I'm not sure. I don't feel comfortable, and it was super scary.
Yeah, it is really scary. And I think that that's, you know, culture really definitely plays a part in that. I know Americans tend to just share too much all the time. But we don't have a culture, we don't even have the right to privacy in the United States. So we don't actually have privacy encoded in our Constitution. It's implied, but not encoded. And literally everywhere else in the world adds privacy as a public good and as a private law. So this is why Americans just, there's also other issues too, but yeah, so I can see that. But it's a really, like, there's some of it where you kind of have to go with your gut and you go with recommendations, but when we're talking about sharing too much information about ourselves, especially when we've got kids at home, right, and we've got little kids and we've got things that we have to be more aware of, it's terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying. But it's actually also not that complicated. Like, we can do all of these things once we get new habits, and once we learn to do the little things that make the really big difference. You know, a lot of people get very uncomfortable not knowing their passwords, right? They get very, very nervous, and that's why they only use the same 3 passwords. I don't know any of my passwords. I don't know any of them. That's not true. I know one of them. Like, I'm trying to think of like ones that I know. I would might know one of my sons.
Where do you keep them?
I keep them in LastPass. There's a whole bunch of LastPass. So this is a good question, right? How do you manage your passwords? Through something called a password manager. Password manager, like LastPass, there's also NordPass, Dashlane, there's a whole bunch of them. They actually use military grade encryption to protect your passwords. They don't have anything on it. And so there is if we were on my my computer, I could screenshot, but I could show you, but it's it allows you to keep all of your different passwords. So I have 3 kids, 2 in college and 1 in high school. And between those 3 and me, I probably have 3 or 4, at least 300 different passwords, right? I just had I've been deleting them, so I'm thinking the number is hopefully going down. A crazy amount of passwords. I would have a notebook. It would be a nightmare to track that stuff. So I use something like LastPass, NordLocker, and there's a couple of ways to keep that. So some people just write it in a little notebook and keep it next to their desk. But if you end up in a situation where you have, you know, a crisis, like, for example, Hurricane Ian that just happened in Florida, right? In some parts of where that hit, it was 16 feet, so about 5 meters of water. It's a lot of water. That means my house is 3/4 filled up, right? That means that I would have lost everything that was at that level. And then you don't have your information, then you don't have that stuff. Or if somebody decides to break into your house, they walk off with your notebook of passwords, like how are you going to track that? So you've got to store that in someplace safe. There also is on like a lot of people will see things like on Chrome and Edge, and I think Firefox offers it, but I turned it off, so I'm not entirely sure. Firefox says, but it'll say, do you want me to save your password? Do you want to save your password? And so the browsers have a password locker. I'm not a big fan of those because I don't think they're as secure.
Yeah, that's exactly what I wanted to ask you, if that's really safe.
I don't think it's secure because you don't shut down your browser. So I have a Gmail account, as most of us do, right? So if I'm on Chrome and I open up my Gmail account, whether it's for my calendar or my email or whatever, right? The browser says, oh, it's open. You're open for business. And then there's actually a malware that most people shouldn't have to worry about because it's very specific, but it was released by North Korea. This just came out a few weeks ago, that actually goes in through the browser and is able to steal information from emails, because they're using they're using their thing, and there's a whole complicated thing that goes in the background of it, but they're able to go there. So I'm not a big fan of doing that. If you're never going to do it and you use that, then so be it. But I think a third party is much better. And you use something like LastPass or NordLocker or whatever it is, they they're not that expensive. LastPass for the family is $48 a year, $48 US per year, and you get 6 accounts. So I have one and each of my kids has one. We got 6. If we have, and then we can, and it's all independently, and it just allows me to share information between the 4 of us more easily. If and they all function like that. They're all very similar. If you wanted one just for yourself, it's like $36 US here. So it's inexpensive. So at this point, and they also have a free version, but then you can't use it on your phone. So I have it on my phone. So because we all have our apps on our phone, so I go back and forth all the time. But that's how I do it. And I actually let LastPass create the passwords. So it generates complex passwords that are gibberish. They make no sense. They are a combination of words, letters, numbers, capital, lowercase, and also special characters. And I never do less than 16 or, usually 16 or 18 characters. I'm not going to remember that. Capital Q, lowercase a, capital I, it's just way too weird.
What about the use of double authentication?
Oh, okay, that's actually a good question. So that's called multi-factor authentication. It used to be called 2FA, which would be two-factor authentication. That's actually super important and really, really useful. In fact, you should be turning that on everywhere that you have the option to turn that on. What that does is you put in your credentials, you put in your login information, your username, email address, and your password, and then it'll send a message to your phone for a code, or it'll send it. The stronger ones go to a third-party app like Authy, Google Authenticator, Duo. There's a whole bunch of them that do that. But those are even better to use because they're more complex, and it's harder to break into because people can still spoof off your phone. And so that actually stops a lot of the stuff. But here's the problem. It may stop somebody from getting into a particular account, but if you're using the same email address and password, you're kind of screwed because there's still a whole bunch of accounts that don't require 2FA or MFA. So that's where the problem comes in. Does that make sense?
Okay, so how could they, like if I have account on some web store and in most cases, I use generic password for that because it's some store with, I don't know, online store with cosmetics. And so somebody would steal that, and then what? They would scan all the accounts where all the sites where I have my account there, or what do what do they do with this?
Yeah, so what happens is they'll come in and they'll steal everybody's information, and then this information goes to somewhere on the dark web. Somebody may or may not buy it. Here's the hardest part, right? How much is all of your information worth to you? I'm asking you, how much is that worth to you?
Oh, good question.
Right?
I really can't put a value on that.
Right? So, like, okay, then how much time is it worth to you? Like, we're talking years of time of acquiring all that stuff. So probably millions of dollars, US dollars or euros, whatever. It's going to be a lot. They will steal. So when Twitter was hacked in July of this year, they stole 5.4 million account information, which included username, email address, password, full name, and also their avatar, their pictures. So that made a nice protecting. That entire package, when it was sold for less than $30,000, or that's what it was on sale for 5.4 million things. Eventually it was going to be released for free. And then it gets put on the dark web. And, well, I don't know all the details about this, because I don't spend a lot of time on the dark web. It becomes really thing. Like, if you're an expert, you've got all this information, all these people have come out to Bank ABC, right? And you happen to know that Bank ABC is someplace where you've managed to get money from before, then, you're going to take all those accounts and just start trying them all. It is really, really easy to do. I know someone who, when her information was stolen, because she reused the password and her username, 50 accounts had taken over. She had thousands of dollars taken out of her account. She did end up getting the money back, but she had 50 accounts, over 50 accounts that had to have their information stolen. I'm actually going to, on our, hold on a second. I've been pawned. I'm going to put in a website. You will see how often your email address has been involved in a breach. And it's probably going to
shock me, huh?
You're going to be stunned. You can put all that. I just put it in the comments on the Facebook group, and you'll see it's called "Have I Been Pawned?" And what that is asking is, has my email address been involved in some kind of breach? And if it has, and I'm sure it has, then you will want to change your passwords. You have to, if not even your email address.
I had on my web page, I started getting a lot of emails that some login attempt failed. What does that mean?
That means they're trying to figure out what your email address and password are. And so if it's failing, then the system is doing its job, and it's figuring out that it's not you. That's why you only get like 5 chances to try to get the stuff. So the other thing is there's actually something that also happens on websites, especially those of us who don't have, like, we're not major big websites, is something called a DDoS. It's a distributed denial of service attack. And it's really common on websites. And what they do is they essentially throw on a ton of users trying to get onto somebody's website at the same time, and it shuts the website down. Because, a lot of us, we don't have, when you buy the hosting for your website, right, there's like low traffic, medium traffic, high traffic. And at the point that you are, I don't know, Bank of America or Amazon or somebody else, right, you are using your own servers, or you're using Amazon Web Services. Like, it becomes a much bigger thing, right? They can handle the traffic. And so what they do is they end up slamming that, and they can shut your website down, which essentially starts breaking it down. you'll be able to cover it, but it's a huge pain in the ass to do. And so one of the security features that is really important to do, and this gets a little bit more technical, but you should be having a going through a DNS server. The DNS server is the domain naming system. And so the internet functions on numbers. We see stressfreemomsinbusiness.com. The internet sees 123.345.6678. And so what they do is they go to, if you've got somebody who does DNS security like Cloudflare, the request to come to stressfreemomsinbusiness.com hits that, and then Cloudflare goes, let me see, this doesn't sound like, we've had problems with this one before, so they either won't give it to it, right? They'll deny access to that website, or they'll say, oh, you need to take a left at this server and it's going to be right over there, right? Because you're not the only one with that number. There's a whole bunch of people, so it becomes a big thing. So there's a lot of technical stuff that needs to be done, which for sure is super important. But ultimately what I tell people is, like, if you're a designer or whatever, you haven't done this. Cloudflare, which is really cool, allows one domain free, so with per email address. So if you have a domain and you are on WordPress, for example, then
yeah, I'm on Cloudflare too.
Right. So you're using Cloudflare, and that's what Cloudflare is doing. It's stopping denial of service attacks, distributed denial, DDoS, and it's also giving you that DNS security. So that makes sense.
Yeah, because the first time I did my website, I guess it was an old instruction, because the guys advised that we don't need HTTPS, that HTTP is okay, and it's not.
Well, not if you want to sell anything on it. If you just want to have like pictures you're willing to give away for free, that's fine. But absolutely, I don't even know anybody who has a website that isn't HTTPS anymore. Oh, that's terrible.
Yeah, I think it's outdated video, so
yeah. So and I'm not, anytime there's been any kind of purchasing or anything, that's always been a piece of it. That's weird. But you know, I mean, I met a woman the other day who was all just kind of, she was complaining about something that kept happening to her website, and someone who's been one of my clients said, oh, you know, you really should talk to Natalie, and tagged me. So I said, hey, I can help you out. What can I answer for you? And she said, well, I design websites and I always do a security audit. And I went, okay, that's great. And I said, so you do, what exactly do you do for the audit? And she was like, well, you know, I just clean it up and make sure that the email addresses are, you know, take out all the extra users. And I was like, do you do DNS security? Are you adding Cloudflare? Are you adding anything else? Like, are you using the what is it? There's another thing that she had no idea what any of that was. And she's hanging out her shingle talking about how she's a cybersecurity expert because she helps people with their websites. Oh, that's not how it works. I don't even pretend to be in IT, but I need a bit more than that.
Yeah, there's a lot of people posing as experts who are not.
Yeah.
But maybe she will become one now that you have showed her
I hope
her
so. I hope she adds that to her content, because it is actually really important. And I think website developers, they need to be making sure those little things are getting done. Sure.
So this is one thing to be vigilant of when you are actually buying and setting a web page, or even hiring a web page designer.
Yeah, and you know, a lot of people are using do-it-yourself, you know, like Wix or Square, or they're using like Thinkific or Kajabi or something like that, all of which are great, but they're sort of all-in-one platforms. And so a lot of them already have Cloudflare already tapped into their system, right? Which is really great. But, you know, the other thing that's really important is not just protecting yourself, but recovering from it. Because at the end of the day, we say in cybersecurity, it's not a matter of when you're going to get hit. It's a matter of if. I mean, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Getting that confused. And it's really important to recognize you're going to get hit at some point. The question is, how quickly can you recover from it? What are they going to be able to steal? And how quickly can you recover? And and so we always talk about backup, 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 backup. And if you can't do a backup to, you know, your Wix account or something like that, then you do a PDF so that you don't lose your content. Make sure your pictures are in a folder someplace online. Do an offline backup. I always tell people both, you know, you can do an on-site hard drive backup. That's good, but you also need something out in the cloud as well, because your house goes on fire. You've now lost your computer that has everything and your backup that has everything. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah. What about our phones? How safe are they?
Oh, it depends. It depends on what you're using it. It depends on so many things.
I kind of feel like it's safer than computer. I don't know why.
Well, because you always have to sign in. You have to sign in every single time you get into your phone, right? You've got to use your thumb or your face, or you have to put in a code, or you do something like that. So the problem isn't so much the structure of the phone, because, you know, especially if you're using Apple, it's got a pretty strong security, and actually so did the other ones too. Like, the security overall is really good. But if you're opening the door to the bad guys, there's not like the best security in the world is not going to do anything if you're literally just saying, hey, come on in, right? And that happens with the apps that we put on our phone. There are a lot of apps that are either they're just designed to steal your information, or they just want too much information, especially those of us. This is actually a good group to talk this in. Like, how many of us just have games on our phones just to shut the kid up because we just want to finish something, right? Here, just take my phone. Here, just take my phone. Play the game, right? But some of those games, you know, you're like, why? I want to play Sudoku. Why do you need all of my contacts? Why do you need my graphics? Why do you need my location? None of that is relevant to me playing Sudoku or whatever game that somebody wants to play. And so there are lists, and the lists are constantly growing, but Apple actually just came out with a list recently. I think I'll see if I can't find it, and I can post it in the group if I can find it. But it's just like, hey, all these games you thought were really fun and whatever to play, they're actually stealing your information. And it could be everything from something like they want access to your contacts, but they're not actually using it, to actively stealing your information. They're watching your purchasing habits that you're doing online. They're watching how much time you spend on your phone. They, like, if somebody gets on my phone, they'd know that the thing that I use it the most for is either texting or reading my Kindle. Like, I use that's my thing. I love to read, right? Other people, it might be watching videos. It might be spending a lot of time on Instagram or TikTok or what have you. So those are all just, it develops a profile for you, and it's what people do. So the thing to do is to go through your phone, or if you buy a new phone, make sure you really need the stuff that is that you have on your phone, and take off the stuff that you don't. And that's really important.
They lose access when you delete the app, right? Or
yeah, you remove access when you delete the app. Absolutely. Yep. The other thing to do is to always remember to update when your phone or your computer. Oh God, micros. I have Windows. I use a PC. I've got an iPhone and a PC, and my PC last night was just dragging, and I went, what is going on? There was a major update last night for Windows, at least for me. But when there's an update for your browser, for your computer, for your phone, the updates aren't so you don't get a new color of blue or purple, right? Or here's this fancy new font. The updates are always a security update. And so what they did is they found a security flaw, and we are fixing it. And that's why there's an update. And it is terrifying the number of people who do not update their phones. That's where you're getting in trouble.
Yeah, I had actually my piano teacher, he said, I'm not updating my iPhone anymore because it works really slowly after each update, and I'm not doing it anymore. Each time it's worse.
Oh, so
I think the memory, it took a lot of memory and RAM.
yeah, well, there's actually a problem that
yeah,
Apple got in trouble for, is they were deliberately slowing down the old phones with that. But they had to fix that. They got in big trouble, cost them a big fine, and then they offered to fix that. But you know what that guy did is like, yeah, your phone is now slow, but now everyone's information, not just your information, right? All of your students who you keep in your iPhone now are open for other people to steal. And you're in the you're part of the EU, right? Are you part of the EU?
Yes.
Right? So now you have to abide by the EU regulations. And as a piano teacher, so here's something that we don't have to deal with this in the US, but that you have to deal with, right? With GDPR. In his case, if somebody breaks into his phone because he didn't update it, and they get all of his students' information, each of you could go and sue him. You could report him. He could be charged millions of dollars in fines because he was not being careful with people's information.
But how would we know?
Well, if your information is somewhere that it's not supposed to be. I mean, I don't know that you would know. Like if he came back to you and says, you know, hey, all my information was stolen, right? You're going, my information was in that information. So you wouldn't necessarily know. And I don't know that they're doing such a great job of making sure, but that people's rights are taken care of. But if somebody really wanted to figure that out, or for example, someone's trolling on the dark web and they notice it's this information packet, you know, everything has a footprint on it, has a little tag on it, right? So this big information packet came from, you're in Sarajevo? Where are you, Belgrade?
No.
Where are you?
Ljubljana, Slovenia.
Okay, Slovenia. So you're in Slovenia, right? So you see this little packet of information coming from, you know, this from somewhere in Slovenia, and they go back and they go, well, why did this was stolen? How did this all get there? And I mean, because there are good guys running around on the dark web too, trying to figure out where all this information is coming from. And there are legitimate reasons to be on the dark web. That's a whole other story that's kind of fascinating, but not worth talking about here. And so, you know, you could still get in trouble. Like if he's, you know, got a couple hundred names, I'm not really sure anybody's going to be worried about it. But, you know, this still has to be a mentality of privacy and respecting other people's privacy, like, you know, and how it goes about doing that. It's hard. It's really hard. But once you got the habits in it, it's not so hard. But you need to understand why you have to update your phone. I mean, I have an iPhone 8 Plus because I've got, you know, middle-aged eyeballs. I need the bigger screen. And so you know, I'm not updated. So I have one of those older phones that likes to slow down, and I go, you know what? I just keep deleting stuff. I'm like, no, I'm keeping my iPhone as long as I can because it's one of the last ones where I can use my thumb. And I don't want to have to learn the new technology. But when they stop updating my phone, I will have to get a new phone.
What did I want to ask? What about the antivirus systems?
Oh, like the antiviral. You know what? That's I'll tell you why those are really useful. The security software suites, the cybersecurity suites, software suites, whatever you want to call them. There's it's like McAfee and Norton Utilities, Bitdefender. There's a whole bunch of them out there. They are worth having. They are definitely worth using. They're not terribly expensive. It's worth the money because they're constantly running scans about all malware on your computer. You don't want to just get an antivirus. Viruses are not they still happen, so you don't want to not do it, right? But they aren't as common. The bigger things that are happening are worms and Trojans and There's a whole bunch of different types of malware that can get onto your computer, and they're constantly running scans. And the other thing is mine actually, if I go onto the internet, it'll give me a green check mark to let me know that it's a safe website to go to, that they're secure, like they've scanned the website and the website is safe. And
so which one do you use?
I use McAfee, but Norton does it too, and so does Bitdefender. All the big ones do it. I think AVG, Avast, yeah, all the ones that I've seen all have some similar version, maybe a square box, maybe they check before or after. I mean, I don't know. It's always some little green thing, right? Because green means go when you're driving your car.
I mean, they're so funny. They all say how they are free, but they are not, because if you want the features that they promise, then you have to buy. I mean, they're not very expensive. Yeah, it's like 30 to 100 euros per year.
30 to 100 euros, maybe.
30 to 100.
Oh, 30.
So between 30 and 100.
Yeah, between 30 and 100. Yeah. So here's the thing. Just the tools that we need, and there's free versions too that are also very good, but they tend to slow down the computer a little much, especially with the adware they put on there. We need to, as business people, we need to plan to spend money on cybersecurity. But it's less than three or 400 US dollars or 400 euros. Like, it's not that expensive. We're not talking thousands of dollars a year.
Yeah.
And they're all, at least in the US, I don't know how the tax system works in Slovenia, but in the US, they're all like, you write them off as a business expense. So you're not even paying taxes on that. Like, you really need to have, if I were to say to you, if you say to me, what do you need? What do you need as a business owner? You need a comprehensive cybersecurity suite, like McAfee, Bitdefender, whatever, and whatever's popular in your country. You know, that there may be Kaspersky, I think, has one too. Even though they're Russian.
I've never heard of it.
Oh, Kaspersky.
I've heard about
there's a Russian firm, but they actually have a really strong reputation. And so there's that. You want something like LastPass, Dashlane. You want something that's going to manage your
passwords.
Your passwords. Thank you. Mom brain. Don't always remember that. What else? Oh, you want online backup. So if you go to my website, you get. Oh, Natalia just had a good question. I'll answer that in a second about getting hacked on IG. You want to make sure all your stuff is backed up. So you do something like iDrive, Carbonite. If you go to my website under resources, there's a link for that. And then I think you get like a 90% discount for your first year.
Can you also put a link under the comments later? You don't have to do it now.
So. I will do that as well. So
okay, great.
So those would be the three big things. The other thing that we also really need to do, if we're working at our home, it's a little bit different. Then I would say to you, make sure your router is split and that your kids are using the guest, because they all share their routers when their friends come over. Oh, you want my password? You don't want anybody to have the password on the same internet that you're using. So, but the other thing is that we really need to be using a VPN, because the VPN, the virtual private network, stops anybody from tracking where we're going. So nobody sees where we're coming from or where we're going, except for.
How do we know we use it?
How do you use it?
How do I know if I have it or not?
You probably don't. You probably have to pay for it. That usually runs about. So that adds an extra layer of expense. That might be like. There have been some free ones. I don't want to give you the names of any because it depends on which countries. Not all of them have networks in every country, right? And then there are some that are better in certain countries than others, just because they're more easily to access. But it's sort of like, think of it sort of a little bit like an internet provider, so you can jump online. But it's sort of like I always picture a layer, just sort of like a sheet between you and the rest of the world. So you're kind of like going wherever you want to go, and nobody can track you. but that means that bad guys can't track you. That doesn't stop if somebody gets your information off of an internet, off of a website and stuff. So I put in the have I been pawned. So, okay.
Can I ask just one more thing about before we answer Natalie's question? When we go into incognito browser, when we enter that, what actually happens there? Is this really incognito, or is this just no tracking of history?
It's no tracking of history. That's incognito.
It's
really, actually, you're the first person to ask me that question. That's actually a really, really good question. There are 3 different ways you can travel. So if you're using Chrome and my regular stuff, then basically when I go to website A and I go to website B and website C, C will probably know that I've hit A and B because they all put cookies on my computer and they'll all track into where I'm going. So they'll be able to figure out that you are probably a woman between this age and that you may or may not have kids, and that somebody in your house really wants a pair of red boots, right? Like that, they can track all that information. When you're going incognito, you are shutting off that tracking thing on the browser. The browsers are not 100% honest on how they do this. I think Google got in trouble a few years ago because Chrome was still kind of managing to figure out that you really wanted red boots, even though you were traveling incognito. But nobody can put, cookies all over the place and everything like that. And then the third way is to go as anonymous as possible. And what you do is you use a VPN, so no one knows where you've jumped on in the first place, and then you use an incognito. But you want to use a browser like DuckDuckGo or Tor, because they literally never ever, and there's a bunch of them, Brave, Tor, I don't know, there's a whole bunch of them that they never ever track your information. I think Firefox does it too, right? So yeah, it's just basically not tracking you. But if you really want to get
love Brave.
Huh?
I love Brave. I have it on my phone.
I haven't started using it. My kids use it, so yeah. Okay.
Now Natalia's question.
Okay. So what happens if you're hacked on Instagram, and is there a way out of it? It depends. It depends. The way that people get into, hold on a second, give me 5. Meeting with my VA shortly. Okay. The way that somebody gets into their Instagram account, right? There's a couple different ways. It could be through games, right? So, or third-party apps have gotten access to it. And again, there's a lot of third-party apps that, in fact, this is actually something that we were just doing Instagram lives about this particular issue because it's a huge problem. So third-party apps, they've managed to get into your email address. Don't assume that because you haven't seen any activity that somebody doesn't have your login information. Good scammers are in it for the long game. They're waiting for the opportunity. Really important to realize that. And so if they can get your Instagram account, then they can get into your Instagram account. That allows them to do a whole bunch of good stuff with that. Good as in not good, right? So the way to get your stuff back, there's a bunch of different ways to doing it, but one of them is go back and try to find the message, right? If someone's hacked your account and taken it over and you don't have it anymore, go back into the email address that was associated with your Instagram account, and they will always send you an email saying, hey, we changed your email address. If you don't want this to happen, click here. So make sure you click there. That's one way of doing it. If you still, like, somebody's fooling around, I know somebody this was happening to. Someone was in there fooling around with her social media, but they kept, but they had not changed the login information. So in her case, she could reset her password. She reset her password. Now, one of the problems, and then there's some people who will never get their Instagram accounts back. Like, you can go on Instagram. Sometimes they can help you track it down. It doesn't always work. wait a second. I was just about to say something else about the Instagram stuff. I just forgot. I'm sorry.
It happens
It
all
happens.
the time.
It's hard.
Somebody
it's really,
hacked
really
your
hard.
brain.
Oh, I know what I was going to say. The way to protect, I mean, always the way to protect is to be most proactive. But for example, when I set up my my Cybersec for Humans account on Instagram, I did it on my phone. This is the easiest way to do it. And but what I found out was that because I did it on my phone, I didn't actually have any of the it didn't have the same history of login information, so it didn't have a unique password. I never had a password for it. So I had to go back and make sure that I created a password that had a unique login information. And so even though I've got, 4 Instagram accounts or something like that, and my previous business, my personal, I think one of my kids and mine or something like that are on my phone, I had to make sure that they're all on my phone, but they're all opened separately. And so you need to make sure of that. And then also, do not use the same password that you use for anything else. To me, it feels like Instagram is one of the least safe of our social media because it's the one that's most frequently hacked. And I think, people want something that is frictionless. That means like there's no friction. It's really, really easy to do. And with that, you lose security. And so it takes a little bit. It took me, 10 minutes yesterday or 3 days ago when I realized that my Instagram account was not set up the right way, that was properly protected. So, so I had to jump through. I lied. It was more like a half an hour because I didn't realize what the problem was. But you got to take that time, especially if you're running a business off of Instagram. Like, that's your business. Like, you cannot screw around with that.
Yeah. Oh, Natalie, this was very interesting and therefore longer than we had planned.
That's okay. It's all right. I'm happy to answer any questions. If people just tag me, and I'll just make sure to pop over and answer any questions. I'll put the list of resources in there so that, if anybody has any other questions. I am, and this would be really good for your group as well. I'm starting a membership, which is going to be a flat fee each month. And essentially, it's going to be teaching you little bits so that they become habits, little habits each month. And at the end of each month, you'll have another page that gets added to your cybersecurity handbook, which we all need really, really badly. So.
Well, you have a way of making cybersecurity not so repulsing.
No, it's not. That's why is removing third-party apps enough? Yes, is huge. Sorry, she just asked a question about the Instagram. Yes, remove third-party apps. There's so many of them are not good. So get rid of those. Make sure that you've got a unique password on that. Make sure your phone number is on that, right? So that you've got the email address. I also say separate your email address from your work and your business, depending on how it goes. That'll be a huge. They don't have any way to get to you if they can't get into your email account and they can't get in through a third-party app. They're not getting into your Instagram account. Here's a good tip. I spoke to hackers, and hackers said that if it takes more than 5 to 10 minutes to get into your online world, they will walk away and move on to the next person. So the only job you have is to thwart them for 10 minutes. You just have to barricade them for 10 minutes. That's it. There's always some bonehead who didn't know what they had to do. So, or they just don't care, or they're just not going to upload it because their phone gets slower, and then you don't have to worry about it. Like, you got to take care of it because all the technology, there's all this amazing technology out there, but at the end of the day, we'll call it human ingenuity, right? IT will never out-dumb human ingenuity. Like, people just do stupid things that they manage to get around, and it's not even on purpose. Like, we didn't know it wasn't supposed to do that. Well, either did the developers, and yet there it is. So we just have to stay on top of that stuff. And I'm really sorry my lights keep going in and out. I should have turned on the light before I got in here. So I'm using the light from my computer, so it would look different if we got through. It's okay, we're all good.
We pulled it through this in spite of all the technical problems and us not being so tech savvy. But this was really valuable interview or workshop, whatever we want to call it. And I really appreciate you and thank you for your time and knowledge.
You're very welcome. Thank you. And again, just tag me. I'm going to put the resources in there, but if anybody has any questions, just tag me and I'm happy to pop in and answer them and see what's going on with that. And stay safe, Cybersecurity Awareness Month.
Yay.
Okay. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
All right, bye.